This was the most boring NHL game I think I've ever seen all season. And not only was it painful to watch, it was frustrating to watch. And I'm going to talk more about this coming up here on Locked On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome back to Locked On Blues, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about the St. Louis Blues. And unfortunately for today's episode, I do have to warn you, I will be recapping the most boring game I have ever witnessed in the NHL in the 2023-2024 season. If you stayed up last night and watched the game, you know that this game absolutely sucked. It was a 0 out of 10. And you know what? Take away the fact that the Blues lost. This was brutal, 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 brutal. So I'm going to go over that game. I'm going to be evaluating Jordan Kyrou because we need to have a realistic talk about him. And then also realistic goals. What do we expect to see from the St. Louis Blues after this All-Star break? Do we see them being a cup contending team? But let's get into the most boring NHL game of this season because I truly cannot think of any other game that was more boring than this one. So the Blues hosted the Columbus Blue Jackets. And let me tell you, I literally thought at one point I was going to lose brain cells. And I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm not like, oh my God, like, I'm so dramatic. This game sucked. No, like, this game literally sucked. And it was not a good game. This game, honestly, was the epitome of no team is going to score. And this was very close, in my opinion, if the Blue Jackets didn't score in the beginning of that final frame, I was convinced that this game would go to overtime with a scoreless regulation. So take that for how it is. I think that for the Blues though, and I can look at this objectively, right? I can look at this as an NHL fan that is very annoyed about the fact that this was a boring game. Hardly any shots on goal too, mind you. I mean, eventually the Blues took some shots towards like the end, but both of these teams just didn't have any momentum, and it was a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of bad playmaking. It just was an awful, disgusting game, and I am quite surprised actually when I was watching the game about how bad Columbus makes the Blues look. And Columbus is not a good team, mind you. So I was really taken back by the fact that this game just ended up being as I see, like, I feel like annoying is a bad word, but that's how you have to look at it. Like, it really was an annoying game. And for anybody that's like, Haley, come on, like, how was that? It just was bad effort. Okay. Um, it, gosh, it was really, really bad. And listen, I know Thomas made a turnover, and I know that's what cost the Blues that goal. But Robert Thomas, and I will defend his name forever, is still one of the best players on the St. Louis Blues. And that happens, but it's a team effort, and the team didn't play well. So you can't just blame one guy for that mistake in a sense. And I'm going to talk about Jordan Kyrou, but he had a lot of opportunities as well to shoot, and he hesitates. And that's the thing about Kyrou is he gets in good positioning, okay? And then he hesitates. And then it ends up being a situation where the Blue Jackets got the puck back. And I'm not saying play sloppy, but I'm saying play smart hockey. Evaluate the situation. It's okay sometimes to take shots that are 100% not going to go in. It's like that one quote, but to hesitate and not really know what you're doing is honestly what's costing this team. And I don't think there's one specific part of this game. I know Saad at the end of the game just basically said, the Blue Jackets competed tough. Like that, but those are excuses to me. Um, they really are. So if you, for whatever reason, wanted to be entertained by a 1-0 win from the Blue Jackets with minimal games because the All-Star break's coming up and the NHL did an awful job scheduling per usual, then this is the game for you to go back and rewatch because this was the most disappointing, unentertaining hockey. And last night, just to let you know, Jordan Binghamton was in net. So obviously, not the best way to end their they now lost it. It was their 5-game win streak. That's gone. But what an ugly game of hockey, a boring game. If you're listening to this podcast, I know I'm live on YouTube right now. Let me know if you watched this game. And if so, what did you think? Because I cannot for the life of me comprehend the fact that the Blues are playing one of the worst teams and they truly looked bad against the Blue Jackets. Like, it's not even like I could say, you know what, the Blue Jackets, they got lucky, blah. No, like, they legitimately played bad against the Blue Jackets, and that, to me, is a problem. Last night, I said, "Give me your thoughts on the game on YouTube community." And, Mr. Gabber says, "Disappointing. Everything was in place to go into the break on a hot streak. We lay the egg against one of the worst teams in history." Now, I'm not gonna say in history. I know the Blue Jackets are not good, but I completely understand where you're coming from. And even on Locked On Blues, my Twitter account that I run for the podcast, obviously, I just was so angry. I usually don't tweet during games since I'm somebody that likes to observe the games and I like to be able to really take notes, see what's happening. And Z Bailey says Kyrou would rather take shots at a wheelhouse instead of the offensive zone. Oh. And then David said disappointed, but they definitely need the break. So I understand your comments where it's like, okay, they need the break, they need the break. But are we making excuses for the Blues right now? Are we making excuses for a really bad game because they played a phenomenal 5 games? Now, I'm not going to sit on this podcast after every loss and say, oh, this team sucks, this team isn't good. But it was a pathetic performance last night. And the other thing, too, that you have to think about, I understand every single NHL player right now is tired, okay? There's not one player that's like, "Oh, yeah, I feel great." No, like, they're all banged up and tired. So, to make excuses for a really poor hockey game just doesn't sit right with me. I think that the guys, they know that they screwed up. It's interesting in their post-game pressers, you can really tell if a player feels, like bad about a game. And with minimal comments about, how they played, you can tell that they even know, like, hey, this was a really bad performance. But I'm done with the excuses, okay? I'm done making excuses for this team. Last night just was a bad, bad, bad. Do I need to say it again? Bad game. And they basically, here's the other things. Um, they handed the game to Columbus, okay? Like, they really did. The Blue Jackets are not a good team. And what I don't understand is whatsoever is that the Blue Jackets had I believe it was 5 games on the road in 8 days. So they were finishing up their road trip in St. Louis. So for me, at least, I don't understand how a team such as Columbus that was coming in so tired still was able to defeat the Blues when they were back on home ice. And it's and okay, fine. You can say, "Oh, well, this is a trap game, the Blues, they play tough, blah blah blah." But still, it's not the best thing. Now, this is from St. Louis Blues Views. It's a great podcast. Check them out. But they even put up a statistic saying that the Blues record in January is 8-3-1, and that's the ninth best point percentage in the NHL. So that is good, obviously, and that's a good stat. So thank you again, Blues Views, for that. But it just didn't make sense to me. And this was also, I believe, the Blues' first shutout on a home ice since January of 2022. I saw that today on the NHL Network. So definitely things to be worried about. I'm not going to go into full panic mode. I know everyone might think I'm going to full panic mode, but I'm going to respond to some of the YouTube comments right now since, again, I am live on YouTube. And if you're ever listening when I'm not live, still leave me your comments and I will still react to it. I see everything that you guys leave me. So please be a part of the conversation. So last night, Cap says, I think this game proved that the Blues are ready for a break. I agree. The Blues were phenomenal the last 2 weeks, and this game didn't surprise me. They can't wait for vacation. 90% of the country was betting on St. Louis. It doesn't surprise me what happened. And I know it's a typical thing for the St. Louis Blues, and I get that, but I had expected more. Even if they didn't win, it was just some of the mistakes that I was seeing, the positioning, the lack of forechecking, the on-the-end rushes that they let up. It just seemed to me that this team was just checked out from the very beginning of the game, and I think that's really frustrating. So, yep. I will be talking about Jordan Kyrou coming up, which I know is a sensitive subject for some, but we need to talk about him. But before I do that, I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. That is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than my family. Okay, my mom or my dad or my brother or anybody got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from a life saving medication that they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jay's Medical. The Jay's case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinuses, skin infections, amongst others. This stuff could really happen to any of us. Visit jsmedical.com to complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to prepare than today. Go to jsmedical.com and use offer code LOCKED ON to get $20 off your order. So let's talk about Jordan Kyrou. Now, I like Ruzi, okay? I do. And when it's appropriate to defend him, I do. When it's appropriate to maybe call out how he's been playing, I will. And I think that's something that I don't like to do as much because I feel for players sometimes. I'm not a person to come on and bash a player. I think I'm more of let's talk about how he's been playing. Let's evaluate and have a conversation. And I think that last night's game would just prove that maybe he isn't progressing the way I thought he was. I thought that Jordan Kyrou was playing a game that he could have been more substantial for, right? He could have made some better plays. He could have been in better positioning. But overall, what got me was his hesitation. And that to me seems like a lack of confidence. Now, I'm not really sure why he was so hesitant. There's obviously not going to be an answer for that. He's not going to say, oh, I was hesitant because of this, that, and that. But to me, at least from observing the game, from observing how he's been playing, it seems that he doubts himself sometimes. And that is concerning to me. He is a player that can be confident when he needs to be, but he's also a player that just has this, I don't want to say, I hate it because I don't think that he has a lack of confidence issue, right? Just he wasn't playing like the Jordan Kyrou I'm used to seeing him play in these past couple weeks. So let's talk about how he's been doing this season because, again, I want to be fair. I want to break down how he's been playing and compare it to other seasons. So for young Jordan Kyrou, I'm going to have to move my light on the other side. So this season, he's had 14 goals and 23 assists for 37 points, which honestly is not bad for the 49 games that he has played. Now, if we want to talk about maybe seasons prior, it may not look as good. But for this season, I can't say that that is awful. Now, let's go about last season. Last season, he had 73 points with 37 goals and 36 assists. So obviously a difference in his performance. Now, if you want to go to the 2021 season, 75 points. Okay, so I'm noticing a pattern here. Yeah, so do I think that he's regressed a little bit? Do I think that he can bounce back from this? Absolutely. But I don't know if I feel confident. I mean, listen, realistically, he would need to get over 40 points in the span of the second half of the season. He can do it, but I don't know. It's just frustrating, right? So I don't think that he's progressing. Do I think that he could be potentially traded? Well, with his contract, no, because his contract sucks. But we can still have an honest discussion about it at some point about what you think should happen with Kyrou. David M says, first off, let me start out with pucks on net is a start. I'm tired of seeing someone come into the zone and then pass it towards the boards, the takeaway, the score to take away the scoring chance. I agree. As I said earlier, they need to just begin shooting the puck and taking those chances. It's infuriating. So I have something new to tell you about. So get started on your resolutions with Factor so you're ready for the new year. Factor's ready to eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. Skip the grocery store's prep work and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef crafted, dietitian approved meals delivered right to your door. With over 35 meals to choose per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, and more. Plus, over 55 weekly add ons, you'll have a ton of nutritious flavor full options to start off your resolutions. Okay, so forget frantic lunch preps and forget rush dinner with Factor's 2-minute meals. So, your secret weapon for the new year is that you're all fueled up and fuel up with restaurant quality meals as well, delivered right to your door. So, this is what I need you to do. Okay, because this sounds amazing. It is amazing. And I know for me, sometimes I'm a little bit busy and I don't have time to really cook. This helps you with that. So head to factormeals.com/locked on 50 and use code locked on 50 to get 50% off. That's a great deal. So that's code locked on 50 at factormeals.com/locked on 50 to get 50% off. What a great, great deal. So the last thing I want to say, I have an itch on my face. Um, is going to be about the realistic goals for the St. Louis Blues this second half of the season. I want them to go to the All-Star break and come back well rested, motivated again, and ready to fight. They need to nail for real, fight for this wild card spot. If that's truly the direction that this team is heading in, they need to fight for every single point. There is no more of these bad stretches. I remember at one point this season, the Blues would win, lose, win, lose. None of that. We need Binnington to be stronger in net. We need the defense to begin to play tougher and stronger coverage. We need more forechecking. We need more shots on goal that are actually good shots and not just being stupid in the offensive zone when the Blues have the puck, because every single time the Blues have the puck and then they're in the offensive zone, it's disaster happens. They panic. I think realistically, the Blues have an opportunity to really be a wild card team. I really do think that. I want to believe it. So I think that those are some goals that need to be set and the standard needs to be higher, because last night's game does not make me feel good heading into the break. And I hate it because I was so happy. I was so proud of them with that 5-game winning streak. And last night's game kind of just took that momentum out of my excitement and just kind of brought it back down. David M also says, also, I noticed that they don't cycle the puck in the corner. Did that part of the game go somewhere checking? Yeah, I didn't notice that either, honestly. Last night's game was just a really strange, badly played game, to say the least. So a lot of mistakes were made. Obviously, the Blues did not play a good hockey game last night. No doubt about that. So what you're saying is spot on. Obviously, very frustrating. But I think that with the break right now, obviously, our only All-Star, which is Robert Thomas, will be heading out to Toronto to participate. And hopefully, he gets excited being around really good players. I'm not saying the Blues have bad. I'm not saying that. But it is something that's a really special experience. And hopefully for Tomer, he's able to just use it as motivation. Hey, let me come back after I'm in this awesome event with all these awesome athletes and use that to re-inspire the guys. I think that right now the players need that. They need that little push. Hey, you can lose a game It happens, but it's all about how you respond. And right now, their response needs to be stronger than how they last played by a lot. Okay. So you might be wondering, Haley, what kind of content will we be receiving during the All Star break? I'm glad you asked. I will be evaluating every player. So 3 players a day. I will be evaluating on this podcast. So kind of like how I talked about Kyrou today, expect that. But every day will be 3 different players. I'm also going to be talking about the T-Birds, which is the AHL team. So it will be a very busy, you know, break, I guess, quote unquote, until the next game on the 10th. So this will be our midway point grades of the St. Louis Blues. So get ready for that. Get ready for some opinions, some polls on Twitter at Locked On Blues, and so much more. So I hope you stick along with me, because the All-Star break for them doesn't mean that it's an All-Star break for you and I, because the fandom never stops. So I will talk to you tomorrow per usual. And until then, let's go Blues.